There we go.
Hello, my human family. It took a long time. It took me being sick and surviving the fucker that's going around. Uh, uh, and
You
so
kicked his
we try.
ass though.
It's its ass, yeah. Girl strong.
Oh, we decided that COVID is male. It's just that's it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Uh, uh, so we at the end of the first time Jessie was on, we said we have to schedule a part two, which we tried to do in March, and it didn't happen for reasons of me being in bed most of the time.
And the whole world kind of falling apart. So
Well, yeah,
yeah.
there is that. Uh,
That's that small thing, you know.
uh, so uh, there's a lot to talk about since then. There's a lot that's happened.
Hey,
So
I like tapping it, so it's fine.
that's this is going to be a 3 and a 4. This is going to be almost hopefully better than the Terminator sequels. But
You can't get, come on, Terminator Genesis, that's perfection.
oh yeah, I guess.
No, Genesis is all. I will fight for Dark Fate. I like Dark Fate, but the rest of them are kind of all trash. But
I kind of like Genesis, but
it had ambition. I'll give it that. But anyways, that's a side. That's a side discussion.
well, I'll start straight off. We did a video on Altered Carbon today, which I haven't gotten to watch because I was watching the video that we did before.
No,
I'm
no worries.
recording something with somebody else too, and
How dare you not watch every single video as soon as it comes out? It's been out for what, an hour and a half when we're recording this? How dare you not have watched it?
it's I usually get to them immediately, but
It's okay.
you Jack Saint, Renegade Cut, and Steve, and Council of Geeks.
Yes. Oh, love Council.
If my notification comes in, I go straight off of what I'm watching. So.
I was just talking to Council the other day. So he's doing well.
Good. Oh, good. I'm still trying to get him get. I don't know what pronoun to use.
Yeah, I think he alternates. It depends on which personality. I guess he's in Nathaniel or Vera. I haven't actually asked him, but from when I've talked to him and met him personally, the pronoun changes depending. So
one of the things
that's not. I don't want to speak for him, so that's a more in-depth question to ask him. But that's from what I've gathered. So.
One of the things I said right at the end of the last one is that I had kind of trans blindness. I was subbed to both Fear Wild and Council of Geeks, and did not until the removal of the hat thing. I did not realize they were the same person.
That's hysterical, and I adore that.
So, but I am trying to get them on. So, I'm terrible at messaging.
Hey, don't worry, me too.
It's sort of the too much, the always too much information, and well, since you were last here, I also it's pretty obvious to most people, but I'm also on the autistic spectrum, which it took me longer to come out as autistic than it did trans, which is a very strange thing.
It's interesting. There is such an overlap between autism and transgender identity. There's a higher correlation of autism in the trans community than in other communities, which is interesting. Sort of an interesting sort of tidbit.
Yeah. Well, it was when you were on Fluid Voice, which is the other show I'm on, but when you were on and you and Alex both talked about autism, and I kind of wanted to Me Too there, and it was like, not Me Too, you know what I mean.
Sure. Yeah, I got you.
Say me too. And I felt like, no, I probably shouldn't. And then the next week I started talking about it.
That's
So.
good. That's great. I mean, yeah, you're always welcome to talk about it. You're also welcome to not talk about it. That's the joy of identity. You don't always have to put it front and center if you don't want to.
Well, it's hard to, well, at my stage, it's a little hard to get away from,
Yeah, I hear you.
Plus, I want to be activist, fight the power, which.
Yeah. Well, believe me, that's what I'm trying to do. My videos have taken on a much more political bent as of late, but
That's kind of where I was going. You've gone political because you had the three different eras. Now you've got a fourth.
Yeah. Well, it's just interest changing. I mean, that's sort of like how YouTube kind of goes. I just sort of go where my interests are lying, and also trying to test and grow an audience and seeing what works and what doesn't. So.
Well, have you had much pushback on it?
No, actually, most of the audience has been really accepting. I mean, it kind of helps that, like, one, being a trans person and then also being in the Star Trek world, you kind of, just that kind of audience that's already kind of politically engaged is kind of the audience you cultivate regardless of what you're doing. And so most people have been fairly receptive. It also helps that, like, the world has made all of us angry politically, especially in the United States. Yeah, so
just a tiny bit,
just a little bit. And to be honest, it's kind of where I wanted to go to for a while. Like, I wanted to try and be a little bit more targeted, but because, like, I've talked about before with, like, my other stuff, is like I do want to try to be accepting of maybe not accepting is the right word, allowing multiple people to come in and at least hear the point of view that's not maybe not necessarily their own, and try to find ways to bring people into the conversation who normally wouldn't. People who, like, would instantly be against, like, trans issues, for example, and find a way to, like, I don't understand trans people are weird, blah, 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 and try and find a way to hit those people. And the way that I found that's working so far is try to be self-effacing, like make jokes at my own expense, and to be very personal about my own experience, and just say, like, this is what I've been doing, what I've been feeling in my own life, and trying to connect that with other people, saying, like, this is what I feel as a trans person, but other people may feel similar ways through different means, not just gender. And then also just do it through geeky stuff like Star Trek. It's like I talk about Star Trek in every video, and that seems to be like an interesting in for people. So yeah, and I'm trying to branch out here, and, like, part of the other stuff too with, like, the political stuff is me attempting to not just be pigeonholed into Star Trek stuff. Like, I love Star Trek, and I'll talk Star Trek all day, every day.
Yeah.
But it's not the only thing I want to talk about. So.
I'll talk about Doctor Who all day if you let me.
I mean, I'm right there with you. I'm trying to start listening to more of the Big Finish stuff because Council of Geeks was getting me into getting in. I also need to watch the classic show, so I'm trying to ease my way into it.
I keep telling people, there are 48 episodes, audio episodes that are in canon and were specifically made to be in canon for the Eighth Doctor, over and start crossing over into the Dalek War, which
that's the one I'm actually listening to right now because those sound the most interesting to me. So. Oh,
well, then good.
I also want to listen to the couple other ones they did. Like, they did one with Missy from the new season as the Master, and they did one with the Paternoster gang, which I always liked. So.
Oh, okay. I haven't run across those yet. But for some bizarre, as I've said, I said before we were on. Other than, well, I watched all of Steven Universe, and I haven't watched any other scripted show. I did make one mistake: the finale of The Good Place. So,
I mean, that's a good one to, no pun intended, a good one to go with. Yeah. That show is Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
Yes, I would highly recommend.
Mm-hmm.
And the ending was pretty much pitch perfect. So
Mm-hmm.
the altered carbon. So I went very far away from that. Oh, altered carbon was an important thing for me when I'm because because I'm still recent. I haven't hit my second birthday yet. Uh,
But
um,
we'll celebrate when you do. Actually,
July 9th. So
oh no, that was a few months. Is it? Oh crap, I forgot. I've forgotten now. I think my gender confirmation surgery was anniversary was a couple of weeks ago, if I think about it.
oh, oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's a different birthday. The coming out
Mm,
was
mm,
July 9th. Although I was out to a few select people like my kid and
yeah.
uh, both exes. You um, it was very important to me because the concept it kind of made me long for that, even though
Mm,
there's this if you dig too deeply into it, there's a slavery component that doesn't really kind of come out.
mm,
Um, but I've now had problems with it because of the guy who wrote it. Um, on the day J.K. Rowling took the mask off and was full TERF,
mm,
uh, a lot of us, especially queer writers, went to other writers to kind of like, are you okay with us? And Richard K. Morgan. I'm gonna I'm gonna switch over real quick and check
mm.
Richard K. Morgan. Sorry, I had to check Wikipedia again.
No, you're good.
Um, was one of the people who is kind of not okay. Wouldn't say it. Didn't say it at first, but then somebody used the word turf, and they said you're not allowed to use that on my. And then went full out at us.
Hmm. I mean, it's frustrating because what I find particularly frustrating about hearing that, because I didn't know about that until I actually put up my review and someone commented that, because I didn't do much research on the books or the author. I was just going off the show. But it's just so funny and frustrating because both J.K. Rowling and then this Altered Carbon guy, like their work would speak so differently and impact so differently. Like Altered Carbon is a show quite literally about people's bodies not mattering. Put on any body you want. Wear, like, be whoever you want. Identity, like physical identity, it becomes somewhat pointless in that future. So it's just so weird to hear somebody who's just like, yeah, you're a man and pretending to be a woman and all that jazz, like that nonsense. It's like, but you wrote something that it clearly contradicts that point of view. It's hilarious. And J.K. Rowling as well, like her books are such great condemnations of fascism and the devaluing of differences, like how to be like the ways we use words to devalue others for their base identity, like the whole idea of mudbloods and like thinking people are superior because of genetics, and like
Yeah,
all of that stuff is in her work. And then she comes out and like says something that is so contradictory to it. And not to say like either person's work is perfect, like there's weird slavery intonations in J.K. Rowling too with the
yes,
house elves, but and that they like it, which is weird. um so yeah, so I mean, like it's just strange how, and I, as someone who writes myself, and I'm sure you feel this too, it is interesting how like the things that we write don't necessarily always correlate with who we are. And it's so interesting how like meaning gets taken out of our hands. It's, I don't know, it's just an interesting meditation on frustration, on them not understanding the importance and meaning behind their own work, and that frustration I feel in as a trans person. Then there's
Yeah.
also just me as the intellectual, like philosophical person that's just like, that's so fascinating. How like it just creation and art and things that we make are so distant from necessarily the person who created them. I find that fascinating.
Well, I mean, I first had this happen with Orson Scott Card, of course, but,
Yeah.
and because Speaker for the Dead spoke to me like nothing else and ever. Um, well, no, this yeah, James A. Morrow's "This Is the Way the World Ends" probably more, but nobody knows that one. So yeah, with Orson Scott Card.
Well, that's why I've never read Ender's Game, because of him, because I know I probably would love it, but it's sort of like,
It's good.
yeah, I do. I mean, I saw the movie, which is not as good, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah, well, Speaker for the Dead is the sequel to it, and it's a far superior book. But yeah, I've said for a while, Orson Scott Card should read one of his books.
No. It's just funny. I mean, I don't know. It gets into that interesting. Like, my weird rule is, like, if it's something that I loved before I learned the person behind it was problematic and I fell in love with it, I'm not going to attempt to remove my emotions from it. Like, I
Yeah,
fell in love with Harry Potter before I knew all this stuff about J.K. Rowling. It's like, that Harry Potter is just so ingrained in me and who I am and how I grew up and things like that, there's no way that I can divorce myself from that at this point in my love of it. Like, I still listen to the audiobooks just like if I need help falling asleep or something. And so I've just made the decision that if I learn something's horrible and I fall in love with something anyways, I'm not going to let them ruin it.
yeah,
But then the converse side of that is, like, if I learn someone's horrible, and haven't read their work, I try to, unless I, like, for some reason absolutely need to, like for YouTube or work or just to stay up on the cultural conversation, I'll generally avoid it. So that's why I'm like, I do want to read Ender's Game, and maybe I will at some point, but more than likely I'm just going to avoid it because there's no pressing need for me to read it, and I just don't wish to support the guy, it's unfortunate. It's just sort of my own personal rule on it.
I just real quick, I implied with the way I was saying that James Morrow is a TERFy person. I don't know. We stopped talking a long time ago, so which is personal between us. It's nothing to do with anything else. I haven't. I'm glad I haven't met Richard Morgan. We were supposed to meet at something, but that would have been uncomfortable now. It's his work is, I mean, Altered Carbon in the book spoke to me a lot, and his the interviews he's done on it and stuff. He's very much into people being able to be individuals and who they perceive themselves to be. And this is right in his interviews. And yet we get the anti-trans thing, which is, I don't understand.
I mean, it all goes to politicization and how communities are perceived. I mean, I had a similar thing with my stepmom the other night. We were talking about stuff, and I was mentioning something else that we had a discussion about before we were on the air, but she also brought up this point where she was like, well, I totally know, I accept you. Trans people are great. I know you're fine, but why do they have to be so in your face about it? And why do they have to be so like you screw up someone's pronouns and they'll instantly jump down your throat? And that's something she said to me. And I'm like, what trans person have you met that's done that? Seriously, have you ever I've never, I usually make a joke about it. I usually am like, you screw up my pronouns, like, how dare you? Like, I just jokingly, or I'm like, or I'll be like, it's fine, it's whatever. Like, what trans person have you met that has jumped down your throat for that? And she's like, never happened. Okay. And so I'm like, all right, so where are you getting that from? And we had to have this whole conversation of like, oh, I get that's from media representation and people who are intentionally trying to attack trans people. And yet she's someone who's, supportive of trans people. She's liberal. She despises Donald Trump, and yet she still has that in her head, that sort of perception of like trans people are like, we'll destroy you and we'll, you screw up our pronouns, we'll send you to jail, and all that stuff that, those groups sort of like the propaganda they espouse about trans people.
Yeah.
And so I feel like this stuff, when it comes to like authors who don't get their own work, I feel like it comes much more from a place of the politics and the way that trans people are talked about today, and lack of exposure as well to trans people in their day-to-day lives. And I think that cocktail of things sort of like leads to blindness in these areas. And so it's just funny, and for us, again, the best word I can just say is it's just frustrating, because it's like, you should get it. You're so close to the line. And I'm not by any means like, I'm not dismissing these people of their horrible toxic views. Like I'm just giving a way to explain it, but they have the capability and clearly the intelligence, having like written such great work, like to understand. So I see where it comes from, but it doesn't necessarily excuse it. But it's just, it's just so frustrating. It's just like, I don't know. It's just frustrating, honestly, on my YouTube channel too, to like constantly have to break down the same stereotypes over and over and over and over and over and over again. Which I'm happy to do it, and I there's a certain satisfaction I do when I see like a video of like even on my altered. Sorry, I'm ranting for a while, so apologies if I go.
No, not at all. I love the rant. I told you before.
Okay, good. Well, it's just interesting to see, like I did on my Altered Carbon video, like a comment that I just got today was like, someone's like, they posted comments like, I haven't started the video yet, but I know you're going to rant about the white lead. And then 5 minutes later, that same person commented again and said, oh, you didn't do that. You actually had a nuanced thought about like how identity played into the role and what it meant. And you commented on him being white, but not to hate on it. And I'm like, yeah, because that's what most people do. They comment like, yes, there are other people like white leads bad, like, and just as there are people who would say like black people bad, and, in movies, and clearly, saying railing against minorities is a whole different deal than railing against white people and things. It's a very different thing, as I say, as a white person. But it's just interesting to like constantly just like, all right, I have to break down the stereotype again for every time someone encounters me. And it's just fascinating. And then you just get it automatic. And like sometimes just people don't even need to look at the content. It's just like, oh, look, it's a trans person talking about a geek thing. They're clearly gonna go, tick all the SJW talking points, which I'm happy to do. I can give you all my SJW talking points, but that's what it is.
Twitter. Because I have that I'm trans right in Twitter. I get the attack. The sucker punches every once in a while from people. And if it's something that, if it's a subject that I'm gonna comment on, that's other people's things. I do have the 3 levels of how I deal with people who are talking about trans issues, which is okay, you've got an interesting point of view. Let's explore this. I'm going to try and educate for about 10 minutes. If it doesn't work, I'm done. Mm-hmm. And fuck you is the third.
No, those are all perfectly good levels. And actually I hadn't really thought about it in that, in those terms, but that's actually probably about the same of how I handle it too. So
it's useful.
Yeah.
the one I will say on the J.K. Just one more thing on the J.K. Rowling thing. The one nice thing is a lot of writers came out of the woodwork to yeah.
I know Neil Gaiman came out in pro trans people, which made me very happy.
Yeah, he didn't that day, which surprised me. But the rest of that I'll have to talk about another time. I have this thing. I say Neil Gaiman owes me lunch, which is an actual thing, but it's one of the nice things is I'm in the Horror Writers Association, and for reasons which I still don't quite understand, I'm not the first trans person, so it helps.
Yeah.
So they were very supportive. I got one of the nice things that happened during the J.K. Rowling day is I got to reconnect with people I hadn't talked to in a long time.
Yeah. No, it's sometimes interesting. It's sometimes interesting how that works out. Like things that are hard sometimes tend to bring people together, and actually sometimes do some somewhat beneficial things. Like, I honestly is upsetting and as disappointing as J.K. Rowling's comments were. I think there was a lot of positive that came out of it. It's like one of those, like, do I wish it happened? No. But I think a lot of the conversations that started, a lot of the visibility that happened, a lot of the things that people in the Harry Potter community began. I know there's a wonderful trans YouTuber in the Harry Potter community named Jackson Bird. He's a trans man who I've met.
Yes. You have.
Yeah. Well, we never met in person, but I did an interview with him back when I worked at The Advocate, and he's a wonderful human.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Anyways, he came out like talking about it and like wrote a whole post about it. Like I think it appeared in some major magazine or online website, and he did a few videos on it. And it's like, her Rowling's comments started a conversation, which again, do I think it was something that I wished happened? No. But if it was going to happen, it at least some positive came out of it. So.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I tried to take it. I knew she was TERF before. Everybody kind of knew it. But it was kind of like mask off was the hard thing. And whenever somebody's mask off, when I came out in a Facebook post because I'm public about most things I do, and I lost 50 people right that day. So thankfully, again, I was worried about my fellow writers, which is, thankfully most of them were pretty supportive. The president of Horror Writers Association wrote me a beautiful little thing.
Oh, that's nice. Well, I mean, here's the other thing too. If the people that left didn't support you for who you were, then good riddance to them. Which, I mean, it sucks to see the number go down, but yeah. I've seen that happen too. When I do a video or something, and if like numbers go down or don't do as well, and people are like angry about it, and there are things like I'll apologize for things when I screw up, but if it's just a view that's like who I am as a person, and in defending who I am as a person, and you want to leave because of that, well, then I'm like, goodbye. Like I want to reach people with the conversation. I try to tailor my message to bring people in, but there is a certain point where I'm like, this is a hard line, and if you can't go past, if you go past it, then I kind of have to say sorry. So there, it's a tough balance to find between like trying to be welcoming and inviting and letting people join in the conversation, even people whose voices are unintentionally harmful or are not as educated on this certain subjects. So you got to try and find a way to have those conversations in a way that feels productive and maybe can reach out to those people. At least that's what I want to do. Not everyone has to do that, but it's what I want to do. But then also trying to make sure that you give yourself a line where, like, you know that this is the place that you can't cross, you know?
Any invalidation of trans people is a line that I have.
Mm-hmm.
Again, people in my sphere were generally lovely, and I've, it's now gone up to my Facebook community is about a third trans people now, and about a third writers, and about a third other people.
Yeah.
Usually other musicians.
I think it depends too, and like where the invalidation is coming from, because there are people who invalidate trans people to attack. This is my line, by the way. This is not prescribing it onto you. Because there are people who attack trans people. Like, there are people who misgender me just to make me feel bad, which you're not going to, by the way. But it's just not going to work. But there are people like, oh, you're a man, you're he, and like, look at this dude or whatever. I get those comments. Like, you're clearly just doing that to try and hurt my feelings. And so you can, like you said before, go F yourself. But
yeah,
there are people who will like misgender me, not intending to be harmful, but either just not understanding or not getting it, or like, well, I support you, but I still think you're a man. But then they like say some things that it's always like, they say some things like, but I totally understand your desires. And so you can like kind of see like there's a kernel in there of like, they want to be supportive and empathetic, but then there's certain like political and like societal things that they just can't see past. And sometimes those conversations are worth having, again, if you have the energy and time and ability, and desire and safety to have those conversations. That sometimes you can reach those people and talk to them through it. But again, it depends on so many different factors and different things. So I don't know. It's such a complicated, hard line to walk.
So, well, some of my IRL, I actually have in real life friends, but I also count people who are friends online as friends too. So,
I count you as a friend. So
yes, I count you as well, and Steve, and and a bunch of, well, I don't want to name everybody, but but yeah, a couple of my I'm grateful that they put in the work. And in at least one case, they put in the work, all of the work, and I didn't have to, which,
that's always the best.
Yeah. And my one friend finally came to me and said, it is taking me a long time, but I love you the way you are.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And stop calling me man, which good. Hey man, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Not man, misgendering.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I still do that too. I say you guys. I'm trying to like burn that on my brain, but I still do it often where I'm like, crap.
I don't like dude. It's that is one of my places that I just don't like, but it's not my place to say. Dude is gender neutral. As someone said, if they say dude is gender neutral, ask them how many dudes they fucked.
Oh, that's a great line. I'm stealing that.
Do it. I'm sure I don't even know if it was original with the person who I got it from, but by golly, it's lovely.
Yeah, it is. I like that. I'm definitely gonna take that.
So, yeah. In the problematic creators in general, the the lesbian autistic Australian comedian who did the anti-comedian show, and it's totally escaping my head
I
her
don't know.
name. Oh my god. Okay, slight edit because short break. Slightly longer break than short, but the um I was starting to try and talk about in problematic creators. I was going to shift from. I wanted to talk about autism a little more too because this is something that's new for me being out as that,
Yeah, for sure.
as my hands do the thing. Uh, um, but Hannah Gadsby did the wonderful series, the wonderful Nanette,
Yeah,
which
which was one of my favorite stand-up sets of all time.
yeah, the talking about Picasso as never forget that Picasso was a predator,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and you can still and trying to separate art from artist, which is it's sometimes rough. I try not to know as much as I can about people, which is not a
Yeah,
thing I used to.
it's hard because on the other hand too, I do enjoy though when I know more about the creator and find that they're a good person, and that brings me way more enjoyment to it. Like for example, the one I always kind of go to is because it's me, Star Trek Discovery. One of the things I really love, one of the things that made me fall in love with that show so much. Like I like Discovery as a show on its own. It has problems here and there that I take issue with, but overall I think it's a really wonderful show. But part of my enjoyment of that show is the cast of that show are just beautiful, beautiful people on the outside as well as on the inside. And like I hear, I got to briefly meet I'm blanking on her name. Oh, geez, the lead actress. Why am I blanking on her name?
Oh, yeah, thank you for blanking on the name
Yeah, I
because
know. I'm gonna hate myself because she is.
it
I briefly met her and she's a wonderful human. I'm just blanking real quick.
it just makes me feel better a little bit for blanking on Hannah Gatsby's name, especially.
Sonequa Martin Green. That's her name.
Yes.
Sonequa Martin Green is an absolutely beautiful human being, and I briefly met her, and she just talked so like I even asked her a question about like what do you think about like trans representation in Star Trek and the different how Star Trek touches on these. She gave such a wonderful, wonderful response about like yes, Star Trek could probably do better in that area, but also we all also are aware on the show like how much these themes touch so many people of this idea of feeling torn between two worlds and two identities is such a common theme throughout Star Trek, and not just in trans people, but between people of different ethnicities and who move to a different place. And so it was just a very eloquent, wonderful answer that was very thoughtful and kind. And she was so sweet. And then I'm going to have to play somewhat cagey here because I want it to be a surprise. But there is a certain actor on Star Trek Discovery who's going to be in a future video of mine, who is also I got this person to do something really fun, and I think it'll be very very cool. But yeah, anyways, but talking with this person. They're just very sweet and wonderful and thoughtful and nice. And so I don't know, just like knowing that the people who make the thing that I love are sweet and thoughtful and intelligent and kind makes me love the show more. Like
Yeah.
it makes me just fall in love with what that show is more because I know the people behind it. So it's a double-edged sword. Like they're problematic creators, but they're also beautiful creators, and so
Huh.
art, and then you got to separate the art from them as well. So it's a weird discombobulated thing, art is.
Well, yes, and we yes we do have the beautiful George Takei still around. So
Mm-hmm.
there's who is very trans positives.
Mm-hmm. I met William Shatner briefly just to do like a photo at a convention.
Yeah.
And it was just interesting because I know I made him like kind of like what for a second because it's just a curtain that you're hiding behind and you go in front of the curtain and you go up stand next to him say hey how you doing and then you like take the picture and then you walk out and say hey thank you I appreciate it. So it's like a quick thing and so I was in a line of watching a bunch of people do this and it was just so rote free like he's probably done this for decades at this point so it's just a thing and so then so she's just going through, hey, how you doing? Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And all that. And then I step in and I'm just clearly trans. It was early in my transition. And just like, you just see him go, like stop for a second and then just go, and then it was just like a small moment that like, I only registered because like, it just stood out to me. So he was, it was all of like 20 seconds and he was very sweet in the 20 seconds that I got to see him. But it was I noticed that like quick hesitation with him, which was just kind of funny.
I just the other, yesterday, I guess, I listened to Will Wheaton's chapter, Fuck You, William Shatner.
Oh, really? What is this? I didn't know about this.
Oh, basically he meant William Shatner, and William Shatner was awful to him, and Gene Roddenberry stepped in and made Shatner apologize.
As
so,
he should, yeah.
Which,
yeah, Shatner's an interesting personality.
he doesn't strike me as he apologizes when he realizes when someone tells him he's being awful, but he doesn't know he's being awful.
It's interesting because my dad loves William Shatner. He's like, I always looked up to William Shatner. I mean, I do appreciate the man's work ethic. William Shatner is a freaking phenomenal work ethic. And my dad always identified with that. And he was like, I think I'm just like William Shatner. And it's funny because then I go and tell my dad, it's like, I think you're like Jonathan Frakes, honestly. I mean, he looks just like Jonathan Frakes. He has the same type of humor as Jonathan Frakes. He has the same sort of energy as Jonathan Frakes. He's just kind of funny. But my dad he's like, I always hated Riker. Riker was such a wuss. I'm like, I'm just saying, you and he, if you saw a picture of my dad and you saw a picture of Jonathan Frakes, you would be like, they might as well be brothers. It's kind of funny.
But you're Steve Shive's brother because Jonathan Frakes is Steve's real father.
Yeah. Is that the current theory going around?
Oh, that's what he says. But I don't know his relationship with his dad, but I've told you a story about Mark Leonard being responsible for my career, for better or worse. Because he hold on.
No worries.
My computer's starting to spit out stuff. In order to get free things, my college has a really big convention every year, and in order to get in free, I would be an assistant for someone for a day, and I was an assistant for Mark Leonard, and he asked about me. He wanted to know everything about me instead of and then he at the end of the day, because the pros were separated from the rest of the crowd, he insisted I be in the pros party for assisting him, and that's how I met most of the people I started meeting.
Hey, that's awesome.
So, I mean, it's a longer story than that, but that's the basis of it. So, yes, I do like lovely people. for all his faults, I miss Harlan Ellison dearly. He was very dear to me as a friend.
I need to read some more of his stuff. The only thing I've read the only thing I really know of his is clearly City on the Edge of Forever, and then the original. I saw the original script for that, the one that he wrote before Gene Roddenberry messed with it.
Yeah. I well, if he and Mark Leonard were friends, I suppose he forgave Star Trek somewhat. That's a no-go area. That was a no-go area for talking about.
I would presume it seemed like there was a lot of touchy feelings on that. So.
Yeah. But he was the first time I went in to pitch a novel, he was there, and he gave me a huge hug and whispered in my ear, "You got this, kid."
That's sweet. That's super sweet.
So yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to read some of his stuff. So I'll have to go by. I've been kind of reading a lot of authors from that sort of era of sci-fi. Like I've been reading a lot of Asimov lately, trying to go through Foundation and everything. So
yeah, as well, I won't tell you about Asimov personally then.
Again, problematic creators. Like I said, it's we can. I'm already invested in it. So if he's an asshole, he's an asshole.
No, he was nice. He's very sexist. So was very sexist.
Oh, you could. Yeah, that you didn't need to tell me that. That's in the books.
No, there's a lot of people I don't get along with, which is fine. For various reasons. But I could like list off. It is nice that I can list off creators who have been wonderful to me, and just and who came and said, you're still one of us. Good. When I came out.
It is nice to like know creators who are just wonderful people, like personally, like not that I know Steve Shives super personally, but he's been, I said this in my video I did with him recently, with him and Council of Geeks, but like I probably owe like so much of my channel's growth to him just being game to help out and do random stuff. So
sure.
Yeah.
And that was a great video. I loved that video. I don't mean to fangirl on you, but
please, no, my ego can use it. It's fine.
Because we're friends, and it's always weird. It's weird when I fangirl on somebody I'm a friend with. It's kind of
we do. We create stuff, and it's fine to fangirl on it because it's like as friends, it's like I'm just excited that you created something. In fact, I prefer hearing from friends that you like stuff because the comments that I get are wonderful and amazing. But it's also like nice to hear from people who know you and your creation. So it's nice.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is compliment me. Say the nice things.
Well, I do. I'm always in the comments, so I figure you're, if nothing else, for the algorithm. Once in a while, my comments aren't useful, but
no, I try and read all my comments. Like my rule of thumb is I don't always have the energy or capability to respond to every comment, but if I heart a comment, I've read it. And sometimes I read comments that I don't heart, but most I use that heart. I know a lot of creators just use the hearts to signal the ones that they really, really love. But I kind of use the heart to be more like, I saw your comment, I read it. Just be aware that the person who created this video, I used it much more ubiquitously. I heart almost everything because it's just like, I saw your comment and I read it and I appreciated it, but I don't necessarily always have the energy to comment back. So long story short, if you get a heart on your comment in my video, that means I've read your comment. So
well, that's good. I'm still at the place where I can respond to everybody. So, although I think there's got to be some people have got to be tired. I'm gonna be on at this point. I'm gonna be on 6 days a week. It's like I did not think that once a week was my goal. So
yeah. Hey. Believe me, I'm doing 3 a week at this point, and then all bonus stuff like stuff with you and everything. So that's just how it goes.
And I'd love to do non-problematic creators is something I'd just love to talk about all day because again, but I did want I wanted to use Hannah Gadsby partially to talk about that and partially to circle back to the autism spectrum thing.
Sure.
The I mean, I was tested when I was 17 and then again recently. Um, what what tipped you off and when did you find out?
For me?
Yeah.
Well, I learned, I don't remember the exact age at the time, but I learned when my mom brought me in to see a specialist. I must have been in middle school. Yeah, it must have been in middle school. So seventh or eighth grade, somewhere in that range. So that would be like what, 12, 13, 14, somewhere in that vicinity.
Yeah.
Anyways, she brought me in to see a specialist, and he did an interview, and so he diagnosed me with Asperger's around that age. And it's interesting for a couple reasons, just hearing about that and in hearing in how that sort of played out in my life. First, when I was being diagnosed, one of the things my mom brought up while we were in the interview, she's like, yeah, she or he, me at the time, talking about me, he stole my dresses and would put on my mom's dresses, and I would have to like cover and be like, well, I was just doing it to make fun of you because I needed it, was something like that. And then I remember the day that we came in for my diagnosis, like to actually get like hear what the doctor thought. I said, can I talk to him briefly for a second? And because my dad was going to be there, my parents are divorced, so my mom had heard this, but my dad never knew that I wore women's clothing at that age. And so I went into his office and like, you didn't mention in the report or anything that I wore my mom's clothing. He was like, nope, didn't put anything in there. So yeah, so that was, I just vividly remember that like fear moment. But also when I got the diagnosis, my stepmom was there as well. And I remember hearing from the other room, because they were talking in the other room, and she was basically like, I don't want Jessie, James at the time, to think that, I'll just use current day pronouns, she can't like do certain things because of Asperger's, or she can't be certain things because she's on the autism spectrum or things like that. And I took that to heart, even though she didn't intend me to hear that. So what I've always defined my autism as, and what's been helpful for me to just sort of like acknowledge that I have Asperger's, and I guess now it's kind of considered just being on the form of the autism spectrum.
Yeah.
Is for me, it's just a way to understand how my brain works, and then I use that understanding to try to form positive habits and form positive associations as best I can. And there are things that cause a lot of issues like obsessiveness, and like for example, this week I've had a lot of anxiety because I started obsessing over needing to write scripts for my YouTube channel. So I've written like 6 this week.
Yeah.
Like, and I've been locked in my room trying to, like, it's like I want to go out and see and hang out with family, but I know that my anxiety just is telling me to do this. So it creates bad habits in that sense, but it also creates, I also can trick myself into creating good habits, and like being able to, be so productive in a lot of senses, like being able to do, when I had one, I don't have one anymore, but a full-time job and doing YouTube. And then I also did freelance writing on the side. I was doing all 3 of those. And the way I was able to do that is I was able to use my obsessiveness and need to make lists and cross things off to help facilitate that. So yeah, that's sort of like how I viewed my autism over the years and being on the spectrum. So.
Well, one of the one of the one of the reasons I'm bad at like introducing myself to people I don't know, especially online. I think I sent a PM to Ketwalski that probably just went. He probably went, "What the fuck is this?" This was very long. But I do have some. I have trouble communicating. I have trouble with eye contact. I don't like change, and all of that. And And when I get obsessive, I get obsessive. And no, I don't make lists. I don't have a bunch of lists sitting here on my desk.
My phone is all lists. Don't worry. It's lists all the way down. You go into my notes, my notepads. It's just list upon list upon. No, it's the same thing. I mean, my phone's over there. I don't want to get up, but if you looked at my notes section, it's just there's like 50 notes, all just lists of things. So
I use one of the things I use it for is creativity. If I can communicate through a work of art, then that's more communication than I can do in person usually.
mm-hmm.
Doing this thing has helped immensely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and fluid voice, of course. But it's easier to talk to someone else on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No,
Um,
makes sense.
yeah, and having Ozma on, who is also, and that's when you were on and you two were talking about the autism spectrum, it was kind of like, okay, I'm getting tested. I'm gonna go get tested again, and I want to actually start talking about it a little bit.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Yeah, I do find that talking with other people on the spectrum is a little bit easier because we like understand and reaffirm each other. I just remember there was a moment I was in a bar, and I hate being in bars when I don't have like friends around. And I had another friend, but he kind of like left me to go talk to. There was a Star Trek actor that was in the bar, and so he was off talking to this person. And I kind of was like, well, I'm gonna, I don't want to be that person who's like, hey, let's talk about that Star Trek show you were on. So I was like, just talking to this person's friend. Again, I'm trying to just keep anonymity, but and I learned that the person I was talking to, she also had autism as well. And so it was just like this interesting, like weird reinforcement thing. Is like we were having a conversation, we were talking, and then I'd be like, I'm sorry, I'm really kind of scared at the moment of like talking to you. And she's like, no, I am too. I'm terrified at the moment. Like, I just don't want to hate you. And I'm like, I don't want you to hate me either. And she's like, that's cool. Let's both say right now, we don't hate each other and we're not going to hate each other. And so we can kind of like just be aware of that. And like, that's not something that like people in everyday conversation normally would say, but as someone who's on the autism spectrum, that's like hearing that, just having that moment to be like, we are acknowledging that fear and able to like kind of jump past it and just acknowledge it, affirm it, but then say like that worry is, you don't need to worry about it. That's something that I was able to connect because she was also on the spectrum. And then I also just formed a, wonderful friendship with this person. So.
Oh, yeah, it's and it's weird. It's like trans people, we find each other,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and I yeah, I think the worst one was the being clingy with someone you find safe,
Mm-hmm.
um, who doesn't understand the spectrum as much,
Mm-hmm.
or doesn't,
It's one of those, yeah, it's one of those things like I do want to, like, I wanted to start dating again before all this pandemic stuff happened, but it's just one of those, like, I was like, I want to date a guy. I haven't dated a guy in a while, and I don't know, I'm just having a weird attraction to men, but I'm also like, it's going to be really hard to date a guy because they won't understand so many different things that I've had to deal with over my life, and it's just be hard to like relate in many ways. So.
yeah. Uh, I'd rather my dating pool were trans women at this point,
Mm-hmm.
because again, if I can find an autistic trans woman, I'm good, because there's so much I don't have to. There's always an explanation period, and
Mm-hmm.
this happened to me long before I came out. I dated a trans woman. That was easier.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, my ex is a trans woman, it was just nicer because we got each other and got the issues that we were going through. And like, if I was having trouble getting hormones and things like that, she understood and she could help me with that or talk to me about it. And I didn't have to explain anything. So it is nice in that sense. But bisexual sometimes makes it weird. It's like I can't always control what I'm attracted to and who I'm attracted to.
No, it's hey.
Yeah.
There's a guy I might date, so
Hey.
I'm free now.
Hey, it just opens your options. You can now there are much more, food on the menu, to put it in a creepy way.
No, it's not creepy actually. You eat what you eat. I am very embarrassed for saying that.
Oh no, you're great. You're great. Don't be embarrassed. I enjoy it. It's funny. We can just spend the rest of the time just making sex jokes. I'm down with that. So
I get very uncomfortable. I'll make sex jokes, but I get very uncomfortable if any of it gets serious.
It's interesting because like I'm not the most sexual person in my life, but whenever I play Dungeons and Dragons games. This is a side tangent, but I always play like I'm doing on Lore Reloaded's channel to promote myself. On Lore Reloaded's channel, we're doing a Star Trek RPG, like a Dungeons and Dragons Star Trek RPG over in his channel weekly. And every time I do play that game, all my characters, every character I play is always promiscuous, is always like, I'm going to hit on this. Like there's a character, I'm going to hit on them. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just a quick and easy source of to create comedy. That probably is one of the bigger reasons, but it's strange because I'm not an overly sexual person, but all of the characters I play are insanely promiscuous. So it's just kind of funny. There's some, there's something in there for a therapist to delve into at some point, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. It's well, D&D is a strange way to explore other things, which I think the last time I played D&D, which was over 20 years ago, was I played a Hawkman who got gender reassignment, as they called it then. It's like, no, I wasn't saying anything or exploring anything there.
No, not at all. It's like me with video games. I would always play the female characters, and I'd be like, they're just interesting. I don't know. Don't ask questions.
Yeah, there was a Japanese sex switch. I don't like those. I know
what you mean.
Gender switch, gender swap. Video game that I played a few years ago, and I'm desperately trying to find it again if I could figure out how.
I mean, hey, I discovered I was trans through freaking Scooby-Doo. So, hey, what does that tell you? There's the live action Scooby-Doo movie where they all change bodies, and I was like, I want to kind of be in a woman's body. Oh shit, this is going to be a lifelong thing to deal with.
Well, thank God I had Rocky Horror in the early days before it was problematic.
Hey, I still love Rocky Horror. I mean, there's a song that I want to start singing in some of my videos, and I talk about stuff where it's like everything's problematic. It's like literally every piece of art is going to have a problem with it, and that's just art. I mean, it's really just comes down to intention and how harmful the presentation is. Like no one's ever going to get everything right. I love Star Trek. Star Trek screws up so many things. I still love it. I mean,
sure.
Yeah. I mean, but there are some depictions that are more harmful than others. And also the context and many other things. Like there's so many things to look at when we're talking about problematic. It's so silly I always hate people who just say like, this is bad or this is good. And it's like, there's so much more nuance in the conversation. That I don't think that we could ever really say something is this wholly bad or wholly good. The only thing is I ever say are bad, like wholly bad, are things that are actively harmful to people, like really like blackface or things like that, which are like directly harming and making fun of groups. But
And
other than that, like everything's gonna be problematic.
well, there's some things that also lose their problematicness over
Mm-hmm.
time. Um, I mentioned somewhere that I kind of preferred Asperger's because it delineated a little better um, what it is, and I
Mm-hmm.
kind of like if if all the areas of it had their own names, so it'd be easier for people to understand. Um, and someone was, well, Asperger's was named after a Nazi, and my reply was, my first car was a Volkswagen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it? What was there was a comedian who made an interesting joke um about that, where it's like someone was complaining about healthcare, and he's like, and someone was like, someone told me, it's like, well, Hitler had universal healthcare, so I mean, we don't want it. It's like, you know, healthcare was not our issue with the Nazis. It's like, I don't think that, no one was going like, those Nazis and their damn universal healthcare. It was like, there were other things.
just a tad. And
Yeah.
I mean, most of a lot of what we know about trans is from that era.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, that's a scary thing. I was told my dad the other day. This is going to get into politics and somewhat depressing, but I asked him, I said, when was the last time in history that trans people had the most awareness and were most talked about and advanced medical stuff for trans people? And he was like guessing like 1920s in the United States. I'm like, nope. I'm like, nope, 1940s, 1930s Germany.
yep.
Mm-hmm.
Hirschfeld was Hirschfeld was. I wish we still had some of that research. That would be helpful. But we can also say, trans people were recognized 90 years ago.
Yeah. And it's sad because the only work of art that I think I've ever seen acknowledge that really well was Transparent. Did a couple episodes on it.
Yes, with Bradley Whitford.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm also terrible with names.
No, same here. No way.
What's his? Yeah, Bradley Whitford as Hirschfeld, which beautiful. Yes,
there should be. I wish there should be a movie. I wish there was a movie about that. But does he appear in The Danish Girl? It's been a while since I've seen it.
I was going to ask you about The Danish Girl next because I have not seen it.
And it's been a while since I saw it, so I mean, I have many thoughts on The Danish Girl. I mean, it's part of a book that I wrote that's is hinged on The Danish Girl. So.
Oh. Yeah. I have not read your books. I apologize.
Oh, it's okay. You don't. I mean, the book that I say I wrote it. I wrote part of it. It's a book on transgender representation. It's a theory book. It's an academic book. It's meant to be used as kind of like a textbook in some ways.
Sure.
And I contributed one section of it. So I didn't write the whole book. I contributed one part of an academic book. So it's somewhat dry, though I try to have humor in it. But part of that book and part of the theory that I postulate of a cisgender gaze in film, I use the Danish Girl as sort of the prime example of what I call a transition narrative. So.
Was it? I wanted to just know because my kid, again, also trans, loves the movie. And I know a lot of people in the community here were like, nope, don't watch that. So I'm going to actually trust you and tell me whether I should watch it or not.
I mean, it depends. It depends on what you're looking for. I mean, it's a movie about a trans experience that in many ways is not written for trans people. And that's what I kind of say about a cisgender gaze. when I talk about a cisgender gaze, I get it, break into the nuance of it in the book, but the basic concept really is that when a film has a cisgender gaze and they're talking about a transgender person, the film is not being made for trans people to see themselves. It's being made to teach cisgender people about a trans experience. So, do I think it's bad? No, I think it's actually a very beautiful movie. It there's some problems I have with it here and there, but generally it gets things right about the transition and especially about transitioning at that period in history. So it's a well done movie. But for me as a trans person, I watched it and I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. That's a life. That's what I mean. The historical context of it is interesting, but like the actual experience that the character feels, I'm just sort of like, yeah, no, that's what that's what I lived. So, and I generally, when I watch movies and TV shows, I generally tend to watch movies and TV shows about other things. Now when I watch now I want trans people to be involved in those narratives.
Yeah.
But I don't generally watch a movie to watch a one-to-one of my own life. So The Danish Girl is a movie that's again, the historical context of it is interesting. But outside of that, the actual emotional catharsis and arc that the character goes on, I'm like, yeah, I get that. I don't necessarily need to watch a movie about it. So.
Well, maybe because he's trans man masked, so.
Well, no, it's a trans woman. So.
Yeah, I know he's trans masked, and that looking at the trans experience from the outside.
Gotcha.
The
Yeah.
trans female, trans femme. I'm having trouble with terms.
No, I get you. I get what you're saying. He's trans masculine, so that the experience of a trans woman is similar, but doesn't necessarily map one to one. So it might be more interesting to him.
Yeah, and he's watching a fair amount of trans material right now, so that's gonna happen.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's not bad, but it's just sort of like, I got it. I don't. It's not the movie that I need to see. So a cisgender gaze, and I talk about this, it's not a bad thing. It just tends to be, up until very recently, the only thing that trans people got to be in, the teaching tool for others. Look, here's this movie to teach about trans people. It's like, that's cool, but I kind of just want to see a trans person be in a sci-fi adventure,
That's true. Although, have you? The question remains from the last one. Have you caught up on Pose?
Yes, I have. I'm all caught up. That one's interesting too, because that has multiple trans people in it, so you get multiple perspectives within the community instead of one trans person standing for the entire community. There is a bit of a cisgender gaze in that movie or that show. Like, it is teaching a little bit, but it is also like there's multiple conversations happening, which I think is great.
Well, I did tell you last time that Pose is very much what it was like to be queer at that time. And the reclamation of identity. It was the first time the second time I tried to come out was about when that takes place.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very the reclamation of identity and the idea of the knowledge that we're the thing that's at least in the back of my head. I don't know if it's in the back of most trans people's heads. Because I don't know most trans people. There's this thing in the back of my head that's telling me and has been telling me, this is all fake. You're not really this person. Because it's difficult.
Yeah.
And a lot of the a lot of that, the way we dealt with that in that time period, especially when people were dying around us, is very much represented in that. So I know I'm old, but
No, I mean, it's an important thing. I mean, queer history tends to get forgotten quite often. So it's important to try and preserve it in many ways that we can. So
yeah, and it gets it right. I mean, the the strangest thing is Billy Porter, because he was such an important figure to us back then.
Mm-hmm. I met him too briefly.
Did you?
He when I worked at the Advocate, we had there was like a big event, and he was there, so I got to. I think I might have gotten a picture and interview with him on the red carpet because I was doing red carpet interviews for the event. But yeah.
He seems like a genuine person.
Oh, he was very theatrical and and just was he had a lot of energy. I'll give him that. He was very kind and very wonderful and just very energetic. So it was very sweet.
The biggest the only problem I have, I will say, is that he looks and sounds just like a boyfriend I had who at the time who died right in the era that's set.
Gotcha. Yeah.
and there's sometimes when that washes over me, and it's very, very hard. So sometimes things are personally problematic.
Yeah.
I can't watch there's certain things I can't watch because they're
that makes perfect sense. That's why we have something like trigger warnings and things like that. So.
Yeah, although supposedly those are, I'm told by a bunch of people on the internet that trigger warnings are for wussies. I'm a wuss. What do you want from me?
The internet. It's always right.
Well, in the old days, people used to call you, "You're such a queer." I'm like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're not wrong.
Because it shut it down. Shutting down is what I've learned to do over the years.
Yeah.
I
might need to wrap up soon, but
I was just just asking for final words on. We've done all of that is pretty much on problematic and non-problem and representation, which is something that's is big for me right now.
Yeah, big for me too. So,
especially as of filming yesterday, JK did another turfy thing in it.
Oh, I didn't see that. That's fun. I'll have to check that out.
And Elon Musk did you see the Elon Musk thing?
No, I didn't, but I wouldn't be surprised in any way, shape, or form. Now I'm gonna look that up. But
he said take the red pill.
Ivanka yeah, I did see that. Yeah. Well, Lily and Lily Wachowski shut him down because she's a boss.
She's a boss, and Matrix is a trans allegory, and you will never convince me otherwise.
No, it's very clear.
So, any last words on problematic, non-problematic creators?
No, I think just I mean, everyone's, like I said before, I think everyone's a bit problematic, and it's all about trying to be aware of that. Like whenever I write, I'm sure there are things that I screw up and mess up. And the difference between a problematic creator, for the most part, I mean, there are people who just do awful things, but the difference between a problematic creator and someone who are labeled like non-problematic creators, people who acknowledge and try to work through their problems. And people like J.K. Rowling just show no signs of wanting to understand or reach out or grow. So, and that's part of the problem. So I guess that's the final word on it.
That's a good final word. As a writer, I've screwed up too. I had to. I pulled an accidental racist.
Yeah. I mean, no. I mean, I did it. I did it too. There was make a long story short, when I worked at The Advocate, we edited a video about a prominent African-American activist, and she took issue with it. And I had no idea of the context that I was sort of putting the video out in. And when I looked at it again, I'm like, yeah, no, this is racist. Whether it was my intention or not, it's what it was. And so I reached out to her and said sorry, and we took down the video and we changed it up and did something different. And it's like, that's part of it. It's not to say, like, if I do harm as a creator, that it's all fine if I apologize and make it better. But it's still incumbent upon you to try to grow and learn and fix your mistakes. Whether or not you are able to is not up to you, but you always should make the effort. And again, someone like J.K. Rowling has shown that she has no desire to make the effort. So if she doesn't want to make the effort, then there's no chance that we can forgive her. So there you go.
That's pretty much it. And Morgan as well. Even though Altered Carbon is a big deal for me.
Yeah.
You know how much I love talking to you, and if there's not a part 3, I will weep profusely.
There will definitely be a part 3. Hopefully it won't take as long this time, but there will definitely be a part 3.
All right. Well, you're coming on Fluid Voice prior to that anyway. So
next week or the week after, something like that. I had the time written somewhere, but
yeah, I've got it written down too, and I've got the schedule. We actually have a schedule now, which cool. I love schedules.
That's how you know you're actually becoming a creator, when you actually make a schedule.
Well, it's also if I get naggy at people, this is for everybody to ask on here. If I get naggy at people to tell me what time, it's sort of I get very anxious if I don't know when something's going to happen, which is probably part of the autism thing.
Very fair.
So I don't mean to be naggy to anybody.
You're fine. No, you're fine.
Well, soon we're going to have an unproblematic and prolific author coming on, which I'm looking forward to. I'm teasing. He's not a huge name. He should be. He's great. But he's coming on because he started doing YouTube videos and said, now you have to do an interview with me. I don't make the rules.
That's just how it goes. Yeah.
Okay. He was nice enough. He actually came to Buffalo and took me out to lunch when I came out, which was sweet.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
So, I got to do I've got to do the YouTube prayer. Please like, please subscribe, hit the bell for all of these videos. My guests are great. Okay.
I can second all of that. Your guests are great.
My sound has been crap for the last couple of videos, and I will fix that at some point. But it's just the way it had happened. Like and subscribe. Please comment, because it helps the algorithm. I have a Patreon. I have a Ko-fi now for tips, and I've got a PayPal down there. Somebody give me money. This thing has made me very, 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 very broke. And missing a month of work was it.
Yeah. No, I know that feeling all too well. So.
Yeah. But other than that, your voice matters, your life matters, and you matter. And thank you to all my lovelies out there. And thank you to all the people who will be my lovelies out there. And because it's Jessie, I got to do the thing. Live long and prosper. Prosperity and long life. Okay.